Hi, I'm Chloe. 7 years ago, our parents gave my fiance and me a brutal ultimatum. Give them a grandchild or get cut out of the family inheritance permanently. They thought they had us cornered. Today, Ethan and I are sitting on a self-made $25 million fortune, while those same parents are facing a broke, desperate retirement because of a single legal document we signed. They thought they had successfully ruined our lives behind our backs, but their own arrogance handed us the ultimate weapon to destroy them elegantly. If you appreciate seeing entitled people get exactly what they deserve through pure intelligence, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Before I reveal the exact detail that brought their entire empire crashing down, I want to know more about you. Where are you watching this video from, and what time is it over there right now? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get into the story. Ethan and I had our lives planned out before we even got engaged. We shared the same values, financial goals, and most importantly, our stance on family. We were child-free by choice. It wasn't a whim, it was a calculated decision based on the life we wanted. We wanted to focus on our careers, travel, and build our own wealth without the responsibility of raising children. Ethan's career in software engineering and my work as a corporate consultant kept us driven, and we were perfectly content. We thought our families would respect our choices as adults. We were dead wrong. The trouble started during a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My parents, Thomas and Susan, had invited us, along with Ethan's parents, Richard and Margaret. Both families come from old money, where appearances and legacy mean everything. To them, children aren't just family. They are assets and tools to carry on the family name. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation from the moment we sat down. Susan had spent weeks hinting about grandchildren, but that night she dropped the subtlety, smiled tightly, and asked when she could expect to start decorating a nursery. I looked at Ethan, received a reassuring nod, and addressed her directly. I told her calmly that Ethan and I had discussed it extensively and decided that children were not in our future. The reaction was instantaneous. The warmth drained from the room. Thomas set his wine glass down so hard it rattled the silverware, looked at me, and said that a marriage without children is just an expensive roommate arrangement. Susan's smile completely vanished, and she claimed we were being incredibly selfish, accusing us of denying them the joy of being grandparents. Then Ethan's mother, Margaret, chimed in, looking deeply offended. She looked at Ethan and asked if he really intended to let his family name die out just for personal convenience. Ethan didn't flinch. He looked his mother dead in the eye and told her that his name would carry on through his own achievements, not through an unwanted child. Richard, Ethan's father, slammed his hand on the table. He said they hadn't worked hard their entire lives to see their legacy end with a child-free couple, making it clear their wealth was meant for the next generation. That was when the conversation shifted into a full-blown financial ambush. Thomas stood up, leaning over the table to look down at us. He said that if we wanted to live a selfish lifestyle, we could pay for it entirely on our own. He gave us a harsh ultimatum. Either we commit to giving them a grandchild within the next 2 years, or both families would completely cut us out of their wills. Margaret nodded, adding that they would not leave a single dime of the inheritance to a couple that refused to secure the family's future. They expected us to break under the pressure. But they severely underestimated us. Ethan and I didn't get to where we were in our careers by letting people bully us, even if those people were our own parents. We didn't need their inheritance to survive, and we certainly weren't going to let them buy control over our personal lives. I looked at my parents, then at Ethan's, and told them directly that their money wasn't enough to buy our compliance. Ethan stood up calmly, threw his napkin down on the table, and told them that if their love and legacy were conditional on us producing a child, they could keep every single cent. We walked out of that house with our dignity intact, completely unfazed by their threats, and ready to move forward on our own terms. Following that disastrous dinner, Ethan and I didn't waste time crying or dissecting our parents' behavior. In our world, when an asset becomes toxic, you liquidate it. Our parents had chosen their money over their children, so we chose our peace of mind over their presence. The very next morning, we sat at our kitchen table with our laptops open, ready to adjust our wedding plans. We had originally included them in the guest list out of standard obligation, but that obligation was now completely void. Ethan looked at me across his coffee mug and said, "We're cutting the dead weight. No drama, no arguments, just a formal notification." I agreed completely. We drafted a brief, clinical email to both couples, stating that due to recent events, their presence was no longer requested at our wedding, and we expected them to respect our boundaries. We blocked their numbers immediately after hitting send to avoid the inevitable storm of furious calls. We knew they would be livid, but they had zero leverage since we were paying for everything ourselves. With the parental drama cut out, everything seemed to be moving smoothly toward our autumn wedding date. That was until 2 months before the big day, when I received an unexpected call from our venue. The caller was Sarah, the senior administrator at the historic estate we had booked. Her voice was steady but carried the distinct weight of bad news, as she explained that a massive water main had burst beneath the main ballroom during a routine city maintenance check. The resulting flooding had compromised the structural integrity of the flooring and the lower support beams. Sarah told me directly, "Miss Vance, the damage is extensive enough that the city has ordered an immediate shutdown for emergency structural renovations. We cannot safely host any events for the next 6 months." For most brides, this would be a cue for a total emotional meltdown. But as a corporate consultant, I deal with logistical delays and crisis management every single day. I didn't panic. I took a breath, looked at the timeline, and asked Sarah for their contingency plan. Sarah was incredibly professional, which I deeply appreciated. She apologized sincerely and offered us a premium resolution. They would secure our booking for the exact same weekend the following year, lock in our original rates despite the upcoming inflation adjustments, and upgrade our entire catering and bar package to the highest tier, completely free of charge. I called Ethan into the office, explained the situation on speakerphone, and asked for his input. Ethan shrugged calmly and said, "A year's delay changes nothing for us in the long run. Let's take the premium upgrade and use the extra time to invest more into our house fund." We signed the updated contract that afternoon. We communicated the new timeline to our actual guest list. My brother Ryan and Ethan's best friend Logan were both fully supportive. Ryan actually laughed when we told him, saying, "Look at the bright side. It gives me a whole year to plan the perfect best man speech, and we still don't have to deal with the parents." We felt completely at ease, using the delay to focus heavily on our careers. Little did we know, our parents viewed this sudden postponement not as a logistical accident, but as a sign of weakness. They assumed our wedding was falling apart because they had cut us off financially, and they were determined to ensure it failed permanently. They were about to make a move that would cross a dangerous line. Word of our wedding postponement eventually trickled back to our families. In our social circles, gossip travels fast, and since Ethan and I had completely blocked them, they had to rely on the rumor mill. We heard through a mutual cousin that Thomas, Susan, Richard, and Margaret were telling anyone who would listen that our relationship was on the rocks. They genuinely believed that their financial ultimatum had broken us. To their arrogant minds, a wedding delay meant we couldn't afford the high-end estate without their trust funds. They thought we were drowning in logistical debt, desperately waiting for them to throw us a lifeline. When we didn't crawl back begging for forgiveness and offering them a grandchild, their arrogance morphed into absolute malice. They realized their leverage was completely gone, and for control freaks of their stature, that was an unacceptable reality. They decided if they couldn't dictate the terms of our marriage, they would ensure the marriage never happened at all. My mother, Susan, was the chief architect of the scheme, operating with the full financial and moral backing of Ethan's parents. They still possessed the original save-the-date cards from before we cut ties, which listed the venue's details. They didn't know about the water main break or the upgraded contract. They just knew the original date had passed without a ceremony. They assumed we were vulnerable, and they decided to strike. Their plan was as illegal as it was desperate. They wanted to wipe our wedding off the books permanently, forcing us into a corner where we would have to cancel the entire relationship out of sheer frustration. Susan, highly confident in her ability to manipulate people, decided to commit corporate identity theft. She called the venue's administrative office in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, assuming a busy employee wouldn't question a confident, demanding bride. She used my full legal name, my date of birth, and our billing address to bypass basic security. When the assistant receptionist answered the line, Susan adopted her most authoritative corporate voice, completely mimicking my speaking style. She stated clearly, "This is Chloe Vance, and I am calling to cancel my wedding contract effective immediately." The staff member on the other end was taken aback and asked if there was any way they could help reschedule instead. Susan coldly cut her off and said, "The engagement is off, and we are terminating the agreement today. I understand we will forfeit the non-refundable deposit, and I accept those terms. Just wipe the date from your system and process the cancellation." She even provided an old, shared family email address that she still controlled, hoping to intercept the cancellation receipt before Ethan or I ever noticed what had happened. Susan thought she was being brilliant. She thought she was playing the ultimate power move, executing a flawless hit on her own daughter's happiness. She hung up the phone convinced that she had successfully sabotaged our future, leaving us with a canceled venue and a mountain of logistical headaches. She truly believed she had won the war, completely unaware that her own arrogance had left behind a massive paper trail. Susan thought she had executed the perfect corporate hit, but she forgot one fundamental rule: documentation is king. When the receptionist processed the tentative cancellation request, it flagged the system and routed it to Sarah, the senior venue manager, who had personally handled our contract extension. Sarah wasn't just an administrator, she was a seasoned professional who took data privacy seriously. When she pulled up our profile, she immediately noticed several glaring red flags that the entry-level receptionist had completely overlooked. When Ethan and I had renegotiated our contract after the water main incident, we had intentionally tightened our security protocols. Knowing our parents were vindictive, I had explicitly overhauled our primary contact sheet. I omitted our parents entirely and listed my brother, Ryan, and Ethan's best friend, Logan, as the only authorized secondary contacts. I also established a mandatory numerical passcode required for any structural changes to the contract. Susan knew my basic personal information, but she didn't know about the passcode, and she certainly didn't know that Ryan and Logan were the only names authorized to speak on our behalf. Sarah looked at the receptionist notes from the call. The caller had failed to provide the security passcode, claiming she had simply forgotten it, and the email address she provided did not match our profile. Instead of just pressing delete on a high-value contract, Sarah did what any competent manager would do. She picked up the phone and dialed my direct cell line to confirm the details. I was sitting in an afternoon corporate strategy meeting when my phone buzzed on the table. Seeing the venue's caller ID, I stepped out into the quiet hallway and answered immediately. "Chloe Vance speaking," I said. Sarah didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Chloe, this is Sarah from the estate. I'm calling because we just received a phone call from a woman claiming to be you, requesting to cancel your wedding contract. The caller used your legal name, but she failed our security verification and provided a different email address. I wanted to verify this directly before taking any permanent action." A cold wave of realization washed over me, immediately followed by sharp anger. I knew exactly who it was. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady and firm, "I did not make that call. My engagement is not off, and we absolutely do not want to cancel our contract. Someone is actively trying to fraudulently sabotage our wedding." Sarah didn't sound surprised at all. I suspected as much, which is why I held the paperwork. The caller was highly demanding and aggressive, but the lack of the security pin was the definitive red flag for us. "Thank you for your incredible diligence," I told her, feeling a profound sense of relief that our foresight had paid off. "We want to lock this account down completely. From this moment on, no changes can be made over the phone without person-to-person verification involving photo identification." "Consider it done," Sarah replied. "I am flagging this account as high security. If anyone calls again, we will document the interaction and refuse service immediately." After hanging up, I went straight back to my desk and messaged Ethan. I told him our mothers had just tried to legally terminate our wedding venue. Ethan called me back within 30 seconds. His voice wasn't panicked. It was icy and calculated. "They just crossed a massive line," he said. "They tried to steal your identity to ruin our future." "I know," I replied, "but they failed. Sarah caught them because of the passcode." Ethan paused for a moment, and I could hear his steady breathing on the other end. "Don't confront them," he said firmly. "Let them think it worked. If they believe they successfully canceled our wedding, they will leave us alone until next year. Let them celebrate their fake victory while we build our legal wall." I smiled grimly. He was exactly right. Confronting them now would only lead to a screaming match and reveal our security measures. It was better to play the long game. We would let them wallow in their smug satisfaction, completely unaware that our wedding was still perfectly intact and that they had just permanently sealed their own exile from our lives. For the next 12 months, Ethan and I executed a flawless strategy of total radio silence. We didn't just block their phone numbers. We systematically scrubbed them from our social media, updated our home security codes, and informed our extended family that anyone sharing details about our lives with our parents would be immediately cut off as well. The boundary was absolute. We learned through the family grapevine that our mothers were gloating, fully convinced their fraudulent phone call had destroyed our relationship. When a well-meaning cousin reached out and texted, "Your mom is telling everyone the wedding is off because you couldn't afford it," I simply deleted the message without replying. We let them bask in their fake victory. Their smug satisfaction was the perfect smokescreen, keeping them completely out of our way while we quietly prepared for our real big day. When the autumn of the following year finally arrived, our wedding day went off without a single hitch. The historic estate was stunning, with the structural renovations complete and our complimentary top-tier upgrades fully implemented. The guest list was tight, just 50 of our closest friends, mentors, and colleagues who genuinely respected our choices and valued our presence. My brother, Ryan, stood proudly as Ethan's best man, and Logan coordinated the day's timeline with military precision. There were no tense family dynamics, no passive-aggressive comments during the speeches, and no toxic energy clouding the room. Right before we stepped out, Ryan looked at me, adjusted his lapel, and said, "You look like you're about to close a multi-million-dollar corporate merger." I smiled, squeezed his hand, and replied, "Better than that. I'm securing a lifetime partnership on my own terms." The ceremony was brief, elegant, and deeply personal. Ethan and I exchanged vows that reflected our shared vision of the future, completely unbothered by the empty seats where our parents should have been.
2 weeks after we returned from our honeymoon, I took the ultimate step to solidify my personal autonomy and permanently close the door on our parents' demands. I had scheduled a bilateral salpingectomy at a premier women's health clinic. Ethan took the day off work to drive me to the surgical center, sitting beside me in the waiting room and holding my hand. Before the procedure, the attending surgeon went through the standard medical disclosures to ensure I understood the permanent nature of the operation. She looked at the charts and asked, "Chloe, you are fully aware that this sterilization procedure is completely irreversible?" I looked her dead in the eye, completely relaxed, and said, "Doctor, I have never been more certain of an executive decision in my life. Let's get it done." The surgery was quick, clean, and flawless. When I woke up in the recovery room with Ethan smiling down at me, I didn't feel regret. I felt an overwhelming sense of absolute liberation. The final piece of leverage our families thought they held over our bodies and our future was officially, medically, obliterated.
With our marriage legalized and our child-free lifestyle permanently locked in stone, Ethan and I shifted our entire focus toward building our own empire. We had no children to fund, no school districts to worry about, and zero emotional drain from toxic parents. We poured all our residual time, energy, and capital into our careers. Ethan began coding a proprietary automated logistics software on the side, while I aggressively expanded my independent consulting firm, targeting high-value corporate restructuring contracts. We were playing the long game now, entirely self-reliant and completely focused on accumulating the kind of wealth our parents could never touch or control. 7 years passed in a blur of intense productivity. Ethan's logistics software caught the attention of a Silicon Valley tech conglomerate, resulting in an 8-figure acquisition. My consulting firm expanded rapidly alongside his success, securing high-value contracts with Fortune 500 companies. We weren't just financially secure. We were wealthy on a scale our families could never comprehend. Our net worth soared past $25 million, completely eclipsing the inheritance our parents had once used as a weapon. We purchased a modern estate, diversified our investments, and enjoyed the complete financial freedom we had earned entirely on our own terms. While we were rising, our parents' old money empires were quietly crumbling. We didn't seek out information, but in our high society circles, bad news travels fast. Thomas and Richard had partnered on a series of disastrous commercial real estate ventures right before a market correction. Combined with escalating medical costs as they entered their late 60s and a lavish lifestyle they refused to downsize, their liquidity rapidly dried up. The inheritance they had bragged about was dwindling into a mountain of debt and depreciating assets. They were facing a bleak retirement, and their arrogant pride was catching up to them.
Our financial explosion eventually became too messy for them to ignore. Ethan was featured on the cover of a national business magazine, and my firm was publicly recognized as one of the fastest-growing consultancies in the region. It didn't take long for the headlines to reach our parents. The realization that the children they had cast aside were now multimillionaires must have been a bitter pill to swallow. But instead of staying away out of shame, their lifelong greed kicked into overdrive. They saw a lucrative opportunity to secure their own failing futures and decided to play the ultimate card, parental love. It began with an unexpected delivery to my corporate office. A massive floral arrangement arrived at my desk with a handwritten note from my mother, Susan. The note read, "Chloe, life is far too short to let the past keep us apart. We miss you and Ethan terribly every single day. Let's please put the misunderstandings behind us and have dinner next Tuesday." A few hours later, Ethan received a lengthy email from his father, Richard. Richard wrote that they had been doing a lot of soul-searching in their old age and realized that family was the only asset that truly mattered. They claimed they wanted to make amends, completely ignoring the fact that they had tried to ruin our wedding 7 years prior. I called Ethan on my drive home to discuss the sudden influx of parental affection. Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh over the phone. "They don't miss us, Chloe. They looked at our financial statements and realized we are their only viable retirement plan," he said bluntly. I agreed completely. We called my brother Ryan over that evening to get his take. Ryan read the letter, scoffed, and said, "The audacity of these people is incredible. They threw you out like trash when you wouldn't breed for them, and now that their pockets are empty, they want a seat at your table." The situation escalated 2 days later when Thomas and Susan actually showed up unannounced at our gated community, having managed to tailgate a resident through the security gate. I was out front checking the mail when their luxury sedan pulled into our driveway. Susan stepped out of the passenger side, her face twisted into a practiced emotional grimace. She walked toward me with her arms open and said, "Chloe, my beautiful girl, look how successful you've become. We are so proud of you. Please, let's go inside and talk." Thomas stood behind her, nodding sheepishly, a far cry from the aggressive man who had threatened us years ago. They thought an emotional ambush would force me to break, completely unaware that their presence no longer held any power over me. I stood my ground on the driveway, hands resting calmly inside my blazer pockets. I didn't step forward to accept Susan's embrace, nor did I invite them in. The silence stretched until Susan's arms slowly dropped to her sides. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, "You are trespassing on private property, Susan. Leave immediately." Thomas stepped forward, his voice losing its sheepish edge, and said, "Chloe, don't be unreasonable. We are your parents. You can't treat us like strangers." I didn't blink. I replied,
You made yourself strangers the moment you tried to fraudulently cancel my wedding. You chose your money then, and I am choosing my peace now. I pulled out my phone and dialed our community's security desk to report unauthorized intruders. Realizing I wasn't bluffing, Thomas grabbed Susan's arm, pulled her back into their sedan, and sped away.
Ethan had watched everything from the front window. By the time I walked inside, he already had our family attorney, Mr. Harrison, on the speakerphone. We didn't want a messy family drama or a personal screaming match. In America, when people refuse to respect boundaries, you don't yell, you hire a legal counsel. Ethan told Mr. Harrison, "We need an airtight cease and desist order delivered to both sets of parents by tomorrow morning. If they set foot near our property again, we press charges." Mr. Harrison confirmed his firm would handle the paperwork immediately. But I wanted to add one final definitive addendum to the legal package. I wanted to put our final response in writing so there could be absolutely no ambiguity about where we stood.
The next morning, 2 identical, formal legal packets were delivered to my parents' and Ethan's parents' residences. Attached to the front of the official cease and desist order was a brief, typed letter drafted by Ethan and me, bearing our signatures. It didn't contain any emotional pleas or complaints. It was a cold piece of corporate correspondence. The letter stated, "This correspondence serves as formal notice that all familial relationships between us were permanently dissolved 7 years ago. We note your recent financial difficulties and sudden desire to reconcile. However, since we chose to remain child-free and could not provide you with grandchildren, we choose to fully respect and honor the decision you made to strike us from your inheritance." We saved the sharpest, most devastating blow for the final sentence of the letter, delivered with absolute corporate professionalism. We sincerely hope that the family inheritance you valued so highly is sufficient to comfort and support you through the remaining years of your retirement. With those words, we threw their own greed right back in their faces. We knew exactly how it would hit them. Richard and Thomas would realize their pride had cost them access to a $25 million empire. Susan and Margaret would face the bitter reality that the children they discarded were now completely untouchable.
The falloutnya immediate, but entirely distant. A week later, Ryan called to tell us that Margaret had tried to complain to the extended family. But nobody wanted to get involved once they heard about the official legal warning. Our parents tried sending a few desperate emails from new accounts, but our corporate security team flagged and blocked them instantly. They were completely erased from our reality. Sitting out on our patio that evening, sharing a drink with Ethan, I looked over at him and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. We hadn't lowered ourselves to that level or let anger dictate our lives. We had played the long game, focused on our own growth, and won an elegant victory. Our future was entirely ours, built on our own terms.